This is WAB's Week in Review, the show where we look back the last few days of stories from your WAB News team. I'm Alex Helmick, managing editor of WAB News. And on the show today, the primary results are in and the runoffs are plenty. We'll break down some of those for you. And we start with the fight for the Republican nomination for Georgia's governor. It will last another 4 weeks as Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones and healthcare executive Rick Jackson advance to the June 16th runoff. WAB's Raul Bali had more from Jackson's election night party.
Billionaire businessman and political newcomer Rick Jackson spent more than $80 million mainly attacking his leading opponent and saying he was like Trump.
I'll be President Trump's favorite governor. When he looks at Georgia, he'll see a state that is leading the nation, led by an outsider.
Current Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones spent more than $20 million attacking Jackson and touting President Trump's endorsements now and in the past.
He didn't just endorse me once, not twice, not 3 times, even a 4th time. I was so honored to have that.
On the Democratic side, former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms advanced to the general election, clearing a formidable field without a runoff. She took aim at both Jackson and Jones during her election night speech.
Their campaigns are not about Georgians. They are not waking up every single day thinking about the challenges that our families are facing across this state and how to take them on. And they certainly do not see Donald Trump as someone to stand up to. No. They want to be like him.
Raul Bali, WABE News, The Battery, Atlanta.
Both the Republican and Democrat primaries for the Georgia lieutenant governor race are headed for a runoff. For the Democrats, State Senator Josh McLaurin and former State Senator Nabila Parks are advancing. In the Republican race, State Senator John F. Kennedy has secured a spot in the runoff election, as well as State Senator Greg Dolezal. Well, the Attorney General's race will not go to a runoff. Tanya Miller won the Democrat primary and will face Republican Brian Strickland this November. WAB's Shemaine Cruz had more.
Miller and Strickland are vying to replace incumbent Chris Carr, who unsuccessfully ran for the Republican nomination for governor after holding the seat since 2016. Miller is a Georgia state representative who has worked as a homicide prosecutor and civil rights lawyer. In a statement on Tuesday night, she reiterated that she's running to fight for Georgians, not the powerful few. She defeated former House Minority Leader Bob Trammell. Meanwhile, Strickland defeated his colleague in the state Senate, Bill Cowsert. The Republican Attorneys General Association says Strickland will continue Carr's legacy of public safety. He's received endorsements from sheriffs, district attorneys, and solicitors. The AG is uniquely positioned to further or push back on the Trump administration's policies. Shemaine Cruz, WABE News.
The race to replace Brad Raffensperger as Secretary of State is going to a runoff for both parties. The office runs elections, handles business licenses, and official company filings, among other things. And the race features a very large divide between the parties. On the Republican side, State Representative Tim Fleming will face off against former DeKalb CEO Vernon Jones on June 16th. Both Republican candidates have aligned with President Trump's unfounded claims of fraud in the 2020 election and Georgia's overall election system. And on the Democratic side, former Fulton County Judge Penny Brown Reynolds will run against Fulton County Commissioner Dana Barrett next month. Both Democratic candidates back the integrity of Georgia's elections. The heated Republican race to take on Georgia's Democratic U.S. Senator Jon Ossoff in November will go to a runoff. U.S. Representative Mike Collins and former football coach and political newcomer Derek Dooley are vying for the chance. WAB's Emily Wu Pearson told us about it.
U.S. Representative Mike Collins is a trucking executive who represents a large swath of Northwest Georgia, including parts of East Metro Atlanta up through Athens. He's a close ally of Trump.
Everybody knows that I do best with the MAGA base. It's because they know I've always been with President Trump. Even when it wasn't popular, I was still out there on the trail fighting.
Derek Dooley is a former University of Tennessee football coach who entered the race as an outsider, but with the full support from Georgia Governor Brian Kemp.
And that's why we were attacked before I was even announced as a candidate. It wasn't because their ideas were better. It wasn't because they were better equipped to represent the Georgia people. We were attacked because we were a threat to what's going on up there in D.C.
They beat U.S. Representative Buddy Carter, real estate developer John Coyne, and retired Brigadier General Jonathan McCollum. Both men were complimentary of Trump while campaigning, but the president didn't endorse either candidate. The runoff will be June 16th. Emily Wu Pearson, WABE News.
Let's jump to the House of Representatives. Democrat Chris Hardin has won his party's primary to run for U.S. Representative for Georgia's 11th district. The defense attorney ran on the argument that as a moderate Democrat and local, he can appeal to supporters of President Donald Trump. Meanwhile, Republicans John Cowan and Rob Atkerson will advance to a runoff on June 16th to determine who will run against Hardin in this deep red district that includes several counties, including Cobb and Cherokee. Neurosurgeon Cowan previously ran against now former Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene in the District 14 Republican primary in 2020, and Atkerson is retiring Congressman Barry Loudermilk's former chief of staff. Incumbent Republican Congressman Clay Fuller is headed for a rematch with Democrat Sean Harris after winning the midterm party primary for Georgia's very red District 14. As WABE's Christopher Alston reported, the results were foreshadowed by a recent special election to fill the seat vacated by the previously mentioned Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Fuller is an officer in the Air National Guard and former district attorney who received President Trump's endorsement ahead of the March special election. Now, Fuller has secured the Republican nomination after winning more than 81% of the vote against some of the same candidates he defeated in March. He will face off against Democrat Sean Harris, a cattle farmer and retired Army Brigadier General. Harris ran unopposed in the primary. Georgia's 14th is one of the most Republican-leaning districts in the state, but Harris managed to close the gap in the special election, finishing almost 18 points better than he did against Greene in 2024. Christopher Alston, WABE News.
State Representative Jasmine Clark has avoided a Democratic runoff in the race to replace the late David Scott in Georgia's Congressional District 13. As WABE's Dormaya Vance told us, Clark was up against 6 other Democrats in this solidly blue district.
District 13 includes parts of Clayton, DeKalb, Gwinnett, Henry, Newton, and Rockdale counties. The Democratic stronghold will go to November with Clark against Jonathan Chavez, who was unopposed in the Republican primary. Congressman David Scott held the seat since 2003 until his passing in April. Dormaya Vance, WABE News.
And a quick note, a special election to finish the remainder of Scott's term is set for July. Some other Metro Congressional District races will head to November. District 4 Democrat incumbent Hank Johnson against Republican Jim Duffy. District 5 will feature Democrat incumbent Nikema Williams against Republican John Salveson. And District 6 Democrat incumbent Lucy McBath against Republican Kevin Martin. Republican incumbent Brian Jack in District 3 goes against Democrat Maura Keller, and Republican incumbent Austin Scott will take on Kelly Estrie in District 8. For more results and information, go to wabe.org/2026 election. You're listening to WABE's Week in Review with me, Alex Helmick. Well, each week, WABE's Lisa Ram, Republican strategist Brian Robinson, and Democratic strategist Theron Johnson weigh in on the scene in Political Breakfast, and they had a lot to talk about this week for sure. And they start with Theron Johnson's thoughts on Keisha Lance Bottoms' performance in the Democratic primary for governor.
Well, it was a very impressive and remarkable win for Keisha Lance Bottoms in her campaign. You know, there's a difference between running a campaign and winning an election. And clearly she had a strategy that she wanted to implement to win this primary election. Did the GOP miss it? No, Lisa. They actually spent, if not millions of dollars, against her, telling the electorate how bad she was. So I think that what she was able to do is to use those attacks to fuel the excitement about her candidacy across the state. But the one thing I want to talk about, when you look at this race and you look at these numbers, for her to win every single county in the state except one was extremely, extremely impressive. You know, a lot of people were thinking, could she not avoid a runoff? Well, clearly she did. And I think it was because of the Black woman tsunami that happened out there. Now, Lisa, I'm starting to hear from more and more women, voters, why they voted for Keisha Lance Bottoms. And it's a lot of different issues that they were very concerned about. But one thing that has constantly come up is that ever since the election of Donald Trump in 2016, Black women in particular have been feeling like the world changed. And so this was an opportunity for them to go out and not only support Keisha Lance Bottoms, but if you look at the data, Lisa, every single Black woman on the ballot on Tuesday finished in first place in their elections. So I'm going to go into a runoff, but every single Black woman on the ballot finished first in their election. So that's a really, really good sign for Democrats, the number one voting bloc in our base. Now, how does Keisha Lance Bottoms expand that base going into November? And last thing I'll say is this. Michael Thurman, who most times was in second in this race, the ageism problem was an issue, and it was just something he couldn't overcome.
He couldn't overcome it.
People didn't trust Deb Duncan, and I think Jason Estevez, while he did surge, he just didn't have enough time. So big kudos to Keisha. She did a great race, and she's our nominee.
Theron, thank you. Brian, let's get you in here. Give us some thoughts on one, Keisha Lance Bottoms, and now the runoff that Rick Jackson and Burt Jones are facing.
Yeah, well, kudos to Keisha Lance Bottoms. As Theron has heard me say, I give her credit for proving me wrong because I thought she made a mistake. I thought she should have put the pedal to the metal, just really focus hard on raising $10, $15 million and putting the primary away. I thought that she wasn't going to. I thought she would be in a runoff, and then there would be a big target on her. The Democratic establishment would coalesce around the other candidate because they would see her as the weaker candidate in a general election, and they smell blood in the water right now. And none of that happened. She won. I was wrong. So congratulations to her. I like to crow when I get it right, but I will always come here and tell you I will eat some crow when I'm wrong. So on our side, we've got a battle royale. We've got polling coming out today. The first public polling that I've seen in the runoff with Burt Jones and Rick Jackson bunched up together in the mid-40s. Burt slightly ahead, but within the margin of error there. So we're going to have a really tight race. And as a side note, that same poll has Mike Collins with a significant lead over Derek Dooley, and Collins in the 50s. The governor's race is going to be where the big competition is at unless Derek Dooley can continue to move as quickly as he was closing in the last few weeks. And what Rick Jackson's got to focus on here as somebody who finished second is hoping that the voters for Raffensperger and Carr choose him as their second choice. And, there's reason to think that the Carr and Raff voters are inherently against Burt Jones and would go to Rick Jackson. Rick Jackson's got to give them a reason to show back up and to support him. And on the Burt Jones side, his advantage here is that he continues to have that Trump endorsement. I do believe personally that helped him get some momentum with undecided voters heading into Tuesday. And some of them were like, not really sure I like them both, but let's look at what Trump told me to do. So I think that's an advantage, and I think Rick Jackson has an advantage, and there'll be no shortage of resources thrown into this over the next 3.5 weeks.
Yeah, Theron, I imagine Democrats will be watching this runoff very closely. Do you think Jackson and Jones will attack one another, or will they try to turn their attention and factor Keisha Lance Bottoms into this somehow?
Real quick, Lisa, I do want to fact check my statement from earlier. Everyone except Miracle Rankin actually got the first place finish because Brian and I found out that Justice Sarah Warren actually listens to Political Breakfast. So if she's listening to her team, I want to make a correction. Of course they're going to attack each other, Lisa. They have to. They even attacked each other on the stage Tuesday night. And it's not the wrong thing to do. You have to continue to do what was working. Now, I've said this to Brian. The one person in campaign in a very authentic way that can pivot in a very positive messaging to the Republican base that says, hey, I'm the best person, best man to go on to try to defeat Keisha Lance Bottoms in the general, that would be a breakthrough moment. I just don't know that the climate right now is just so unpredictable because now you got to get people back out to vote. But they're going to have enough money to achieve all their goals.
Yeah, Brian, this commanding win signals a unified Democratic Party. So will this change the way Republicans approach the runoff and eventually the general election?
You cannot turn your eyes to the general election when you're in the middle of a primary runoff. I mean, you've got to do turnout. You've got to have an ideological appeal to conservatives in a Republican primary or to liberals in a Democratic primary. And if you don't keep your eye on the ball, you will strike out. And then there is no general election for you. So, no, they are not thinking about Keisha Lance Bottoms. But I will tell you this. They feel very good that she is the nominee because we feel like her record in the city of Atlanta is one that's not going to be appealing statewide. We saw crime surge. We've been over it time and time again over the last 7, 8 years here. So I think that branding has sunk in. I agree with Theron. The Black woman tsunami really did carry her to shore. And I do think the Democrats are unified. I think the Democrats are universally angry and energized. All that's true. Republicans have to factor that in, and Republicans have to nominate somebody who's a better candidate, somebody who's a clear, better alternative. And the onus is on them. Onus is on those voters to make those smart decisions that attract the deciders, the people who decide general elections in Georgia.
That was WABE's Lisa Rayam with Democratic strategist Theron Johnson and Republican strategist Brian Robinson. Go get the Political Breakfast podcast, fresh episodes each week. That's all for this election roundup episode. I'm Alex Helmick. Thank you for supporting WABE News and for listening to the Week in Review.